We are starting a new series today called Vaguebooking. Anybody familiar with Vaguebooking before we started this series, started talking about it? No, not the term, but once we started talking about it, you went back and looked, you're like, oh yeah, I know what they're talking about. Yeah, some of you all engage in Vaguebooking, putting out those vague posts that you just want somebody to ask you what's going on. For the love of everybody in this room, please stop. I mean, can we just put an end to it? I mean, just tell us what it is that you want us to know. And I know there are a lot of different reasons. Sometimes you just got to get something off your chest without giving too much information. I get it. I understand. But fortunately for all of you, we are here to help, and we have the answers to those vague book posts. And we're going to let you know over the next 6 weeks, including today, what those posts mean, so that when you see someone post one of those vague posts, you'll know exactly what it is they're talking about. And we're going to start today with I can't even right now. Y'all snicker because you've heard it. And maybe some of you have put it out there. I can't even right now. You can't even what right now? You know what's funny? I had somebody send me a screenshot of somebody else's post. Nobody here, I don't think. But it was a vague post, and it said, I just don't understand. Just don't understand what? Like anything ever? I mean, what are we talking about here? I mean, this is where we're going. So today, I can't even right now. By the way, if Facebook ever sends somebody a notification when their post or screenshot, we're going to have a lot of people be in some trouble. But anyway, I can't even right now. And so we're going to answer that question. And now listen, today is really a continuous conversation into next week. So it's kind of two-part of a whole where we had one and two choices. We could have just like gone long today, 30 minutes over or so, or we could have broken it up into 2 weeks. So instead of going through and having a good business meeting and voted on it, I just assumed you guys would have wanted to break it up and spread it out over 2 weeks. Am I right, or you just want to? Yeah, okay. All right, so we'll wrap it up in time today, but next week we're going to carry on the conversation from today. So today is going to be kind of leave you hanging a little bit, and then we'll answer the open-ended dialogue next week. All right, so to get us started in where we're going today, I want to go back into Exodus 19. And now, if you're not even a Christian, right? If you're not a believer, if you're not a church-going person, you have at least heard of Moses, right? I mean, Moses parted the Red Sea, for crying out loud. You've heard of Moses. Maybe you don't know much about Moses, but you've heard of him. You go all the way back into history. Moses went into Egypt. The Israelites were slaves to the Egyptians. He went in, he led the people out of captivity, crossed the Red Sea, got into the wilderness, and they wound up wandering around for 40 years. Well, we pick up in the wilderness here in our story. And they're in this place called Sinai. They get to the base of this mountain that's called, cleverly enough, Mount Sinai. And so they get there, and God's talking to Moses. And in that system, only the priest could have interaction with God and would get a word from God, and then they would deliver it to the people. And so you got Moses, his family, his brother Aaron was one of the priests, and they're there. And Moses gets to the base of Mount Sinai. God calls him up to the top, and God's talking to him about this structure that he's about to put in place. And this is what he said, Exodus 19. He tells him, I want you to go back down to your people, and I want you to tell them these words. He says, now, if you will obey me and keep my covenant and will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples on earth, for all the earth belongs to me, this is God talking, and you will be my kingdom of priests, my holy nation. This is the message you must give to the people of Israel. So he goes down the mountain, got all these people down here. They're sitting around waiting to hear from Moses. What does God have to say? And he tells them, God says, if you'll keep my commands and everything I tell you to do, then I'm going to bless you. And they're like, here's their answer. Moses returned, gets all the elders together. The people responded, we will do everything the Lord has commanded. Everything. So Moses brought the people's answer back up the mountain to God. So he goes back up there. While he's up there, he gets all these different laws. And there are a lot of laws that are there. A lot of different ones that are, and some of them are really strict and rigid. Some of them are a little bit weird. Some of these, like in Leviticus chapter 11, it's very specific. You can't eat bacon. Now, I would be in trouble because tomorrow I got a breakfast appointment at 9 a.m. and I specifically asked to go to a spot that has really good bacon. So I'd be in trouble if we're under the Old Testament law and way of doing things. You go to Deuteronomy, there's a law that says you can stone a rebellious son. So if your son, teenage son, some of y'all are laughing like, sign me up. If your son was rebellious to the point that the parents could not do anything with him, they could take him to the elders of the city. The elders of the city would gather around, make a judgment, and if it was to the point where they felt like they needed to do something, they could stone the young man to death. And some of you are like, well, let's don't take it that far. Let's just get his attention, right? But that was in the law that you could stone a rebellious son if they were to the point of not having any repentance at all. All right, and then you go back to Leviticus, and there's this law that you could not wear mixed fabrics. Now, I'd be in trouble because today I've got on a pair of jeans that are 98% denim and 2% elastane. It's kind of like a spandex. Guys, listen, don't judge. All right, I resisted for a long time too, but I'm just telling you, it'll change your life. I feel like if I did calisthenics, I could get up and do some in these jeans right here. 2%, that's it. Now look, I know some of you are like, you're not giving up your man card. You don't have to give up 2% of it. That's it, right? Some of you don't even have really 2% left, so you're holding on to that with everything you got. I understand. I'm just telling you, I'd be in trouble if I was under these requirements, because I've got on a pair of pants that have mixed fabrics, all right? So you see, and there are hundreds of laws that God had given Moses. So he goes back down to his people, and we flip over here to chapter 24. Moses comes back down. He says, all right, listen, these are all the laws that God's given us. The 10 commandments included in this, have no other gods before me, don't commit adultery, don't commit murder, all those, right? They come down and all these others added to them. They say, we will do everything the Lord has commanded. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it aloud to the people. It's like, listen, I want you guys to understand what you're getting yourself into. Read the whole thing to them. Here's what they said. We will do everything the Lord has commanded. We will obey. So Moses heads back on up to the top of that mountain to tell God. He's fired up. He's getting the rest of these laws, over 600 of them. He's up there a couple of weeks, maybe a month. People start to get a little restless. Like, where's Moses? Like, he's the guy that's kind of giving us God's word. What's going on? We need some kind of guidance. Chapter 32 of Exodus. When the people saw how long it was taking Moses to come back down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron. Come on, they said. Now, Aaron, remember, Moses' brother, the priest, all right? Together, come on, make us some gods who can lead us. Moses barely gets to the top of the mountain, and they're already wanting to create a false god. But no fear, the priest is in charge, right? All right, make us some gods who can lead us. We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses who brought us here from the land of Egypt. So Aaron said, take the gold rings from the ears of your wives and sons and daughters, bring them to me. All the people took the gold rings from their ears, brought them to Aaron. Aaron took the gold, melted it down, and molded it into a shape of a calf. When the people of Israel saw it, they exclaimed, these are the gods who brought you out of the land of Egypt. So now think about how stupid these people are. They have come out of the land of Egypt. They were slaves. They are in the wilderness. They have made this calf out of gold that were just rings moments earlier, and they're saying that that's the God that brought them out of Egypt. All right, you get that? Okay. Aaron, the priest, saw how excited the people were. So he built an altar in front of the calf. Then he announced, tomorrow will be a festival to the Lord. So they wake up early, they give sacrifices to these golden calves. They're all celebrating, they get drunk. A lot of pagan revelry. It's a free-for-all. Well, God says, hey, Moses, your people down there are acting foolish. You need to get down there. So Moses goes down. He gives them the what for. I mean, he is hot, as you can probably imagine. He turns to Aaron. He says, what did these people do to you to make you bring such terrible sin upon them? Aaron said, "Don't get so upset. You know how evil these people are. They said to me, 'Make us gods who will lead us.' We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses who brought us here from the land of Egypt. So I told them, 'Whoever has gold jewelry, take it off.' When they brought it to me, I simply threw it into the fire, and out came this calf." Now, Aaron molded the calf. Moses comes down. He's like, "What happened?" And he's like, "What? I don't know. I just threw the gold in there, and then this golden calf just kind of appeared." Moses wasn't having any of it. And you start to see the seriousness of the demands of the law. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. This is Moses talking. "Each of you take your swords, go back and forth from one end of the camp to the other, kill everyone, your brothers, friends, neighbors." The Levites obeyed Moses' command. About 3,000 people died that day. How'd y'all like to go to Moses' church? Y'all act up. He's wielding a sword. But here's the reality of it. The demands of the law were so stringent, and God wanted to make a point that it was so serious. This was not to be taken lightly. The effects of the law, you see what happened. It doesn't look like this is a good thing, right? I mean, how can anything that leads to such death and destruction be good? Except the law was good. And Paul talks about that in Romans when he says that the law is holy. And so if the law is holy, then why do anything other than keep the law? Why not just keep it through into today if the law is holy? That's a good question, right? So let's look at that. Look at what Paul says in Romans chapter 3, verse 20. "No one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin." So Paul says, listen, first of all, the law can't make you righteous. The law declares God's righteousness, reveals it, but it can't make you righteous. Okay? But what it does do, it makes you conscious of your sin. So when the law came in, then we were made aware of our sin. We became conscious of that. In Hebrews chapter 10 talks us through the relationship of sin and law in that old system. Look at what it says. Verse 1 of chapter 10. "The old system under the law of Moses was only a shadow, a dim preview of the good things to come, not the good things themselves. The sacrifices under that system were repeated again and again, year after year, but they were never able to provide perfect cleansing for those who came to worship. If they could have provided perfect cleansing, the sacrifices would have stopped, for the worshipers would have been purified once for all time, and their feelings of guilt would have disappeared. But instead, these sacrifices actually reminded them of their sin year after year." What the writer of Hebrews is saying is that this system that was in place, all it did was by year after year, you having to come and make a sacrifice, it just reminded you of your sin. And you no longer offer the sacrifice to the priest before God for your sins. You turn and leave that place, and you're already conscious of your sin and the sacrifice you're going to have to make next year. And every day, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, they were conscious of their sin because that's what that system did. That's what the law did. It reminded them of their sin continuously. And you heard the word in Hebrews talk about not having a clear conscience before God. And that's in a sense of not knowing that you're in right standing with God. Not having a clear conscience as to your acceptance and your freedom with God and in your standing with God. So I want you to remember this. You can't have a clear conscience if you are sin conscious. If you're constantly being reminded of your sin and you're constantly being sin conscious, you can't have a clear conscience with God. Don't take my word for it. Go back and read the text. And some of you want to know why we don't preach about sin any more than we do. We've had people that have left Heritage upset, mad, that we don't preach on sin, that we don't tell people to stop sinning enough, that we're too soft on sin, and that we don't constantly talk to people about what it is they're doing wrong. These are legitimate conversations. Now, some of y'all are like, yes, that's legit. But these are the conversations that people have. They believe that we're soft on sin. Listen to me. I hate sin. As believers, we should hate sin as much as God hates sin. When you see the effects of sin in people's lives, the more you see it, the more it should grieve you, the more it should hurt your heart, the more you should hate sin. Some people want us to tell people to stop sinning more. Here you go. If you're sinning, stop. If you're sinning, stop. If you're cheating on your wife, stop cheating on your wife. If you're cheating on your taxes, stop cheating on your taxes. If you're lying to your husband, stop lying to your husband. If you wake up every day and all day you spend it gossiping from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, stop. Stop. Stop sinning. Are you guys happy now? Stop sinning. But here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to stand up here week after week, month after month, year after year, and constantly remind you of your sin. My message is not going to be sin conscious. Our message at Heritage is not one of sin consciousness. Do you know why? Because you hit your target. You hit what you aim at. That's why we have this big target on stage. You're probably sitting there wondering, when's he getting to that? Here we are. Any bow hunters here? Anybody hunt with a bow? This might surprise you. I don't do much bow hunting. Some of y'all say, that's because you got them spandex pants on. That's neither here nor there. That is neither here nor there. That's not even that funny. But listen, if I had a bow, and the handful of times I've shot a bow, and I aim it at that target, I'm going to get close, and I'll probably hit it somewhere in there. I may even hit the bullseye if I keep practicing and keep aiming at the target over and over again. I'm not going to shoot over here. I'm not going to shoot back there. I'm going to hit some part of that target because that's what I'm aiming for. That's what sin consciousness does to you. It causes you to hit the target. So if we stand up here and we talk about your sin all the time, guess what you're going to be doing? Yeah, sinning. So stop. Don't stop. But that's why we don't spend so much time. There are a few reasons that I want to walk through and talk through to lay this out for you as to why specifically we don't focus on your sin and what you're doing. Number one, sin thrives under the law. You're like, whoa, what? What? Sin thrives under the law. Look at what Paul says in Romans. I am suggesting that the law of God is sinful? Of course not. In fact, it was the law that showed me my sin. Remember we talked about it made you aware of your sin? I would never have known that coveting is wrong if the law had not said, you must not covet. But sin used this command to arouse all kinds of covetous desires within me. If there were no law, sin would not have that power. The law says, don't covet. Paul says that sin used the command to arouse all kinds of covetous desires within me. The law is not the problem. Sin is the problem. But sin uses the law and the demands of the law as its basis for enacting all of its evil intentions and all of its destruction. And sin is a lie. Look at what he says. At one time, I lived without understanding the law. But when I learned the command not to covet, for instance, the power of sin came to life. And look at what it did. And I died. So I discovered that the law's commands, which were supposed to bring life, brought spiritual death instead. Sin took advantage of those commands and deceived me. It used the commands to kill me. That's what sin does. Sin deceives you into thinking that if you just keep the law and you keep the demands, then by your own good merit, you're going to be in good standing with God. And that if you keep the law and you keep the demands, then there's life there. That you're going to experience the life that comes with following the demands of the law. Paul says, that's not the case. When you try to keep the demands of the law, it brings nothing but death. He says it this way in 1 Corinthians 15. Sin is the sting that results in death, and the law gives sin its power. The law gives sin its power. To whatever it is that's a living organism, you personally, individually, sin is the sting that results in death. And the law gives sin its power in your life. And then us collectively as a church. You show me a church that is preaching law and the demands of the law, and that by your own merit, that whatever it is that you do keeps you in good standing with God, and I'll show you a church that's dying. Because Paul is very clear that the sin is the sting that results in death, and the law gives sin its power. Sin thrives under the law. The second reason that my message isn't going to be sin conscious is because it's all or none. It's all or none. Here's what I mean. Look at Galatians 3. Look at what Paul says here. All who rely on works of the law are under a curse. Uh-oh. So you want to rely on your ability to uphold this law? You're going to be under a curse. Because cursed is everyone who does not abide by all things written in the book of the law and do them. Verse 12. The law is not of faith, rather the one who does them shall live by them. And guess what? James says it this way, that if you break one of them, you break all of them. Look at what he says. Whoever keeps the whole law and stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. See, the law is not these individual injunctions that we get to kind of pick and choose which ones we want to follow and which ones we don't want to follow, which ones we want to condemn people for not doing, which ones we want to put heavy shackles on someone to do. It's all or nothing. It's a unified system that shows us God's holiness, and it shows us our sinfulness. And we tend to do these religious gymnastics where we dance around and we tell people, oh, well, you got to do this and you don't have to do this. And well, that was really not really for this time. But yeah, it's a good rule, right? I mean, don't commit adultery. That's good, right? So let's really focus on that and don't commit murder. And that doesn't seem to really, don't eat bacon. Come on, that's a little silly. We can eat bacon. So we pick and choose, and then it gets confusing and you don't know which one to follow and which one to don't. And the third reason that our message is not a sin consciousness reason is because you can't even right now. Y'all say this with me. I can't even right now. You ready? I can't even right now. Yeah, that's that vague post that now you'll know the answer to. You can't keep the demands of the law even if you wanted to. The Israelites couldn't wait a couple of weeks for Moses to get down off the mountain, and they're already making false idols, and the priest is lying and making a calf, and it's ridiculous. And it was new, it was fresh, it was this new idea. Yeah, God, tell us what to do. We'll do it, we'll be your people. How'd that work out? And then Jesus comes onto the scene, and my goodness, he really takes things to a whole new level. Right? Because he says that if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. And if your eyes cause you to lust after someone, then it's better to gouge them out than to sin. And then so we kind of dance around that and say, well, he didn't really mean that. He was speaking in hyperbole. No, he meant it. He meant that sin is so serious that it's better for you to walk around with no hands, no feet, no eyes, you can't hear anything than it is to fall into sin. That's the seriousness of sin. We can't keep up with those demands. I mean, how are we doing today? How are you doing today? Oh, today was a good day? How about yesterday? Or Friday? Leaving work, in traffic, you're stressed and frustrated, ready to get to the house. Someone cuts you off. How'd that go? I mean, that wasn't too bad, right? I mean, not all the law is as bad and as heinous as the rest of them. That's right. But one is part of the whole. You break one, you break them all. And so we have this tendency to want to, in circles that I grew up in, maybe you didn't. I mean, everybody's from a different background. But in the circles that I grew up in, the preacher, it was a sin consciousness message. And there would be times where he didn't feel like it was getting across to his folks, right? The results weren't what he wanted and what he had hoped those demands would bring about. So what do? You have a what? Y'all know, what do you have? A revival, that's right. Let's bring in somebody else to tell them how bad they are. Maybe a different way of saying it will get things going in the right direction, right? But then the point is to have all those people that don't show up because they don't feel guilty enough for you making them feel bad about not being there. Those aren't the people that come to the revival. It's just the ones that are there on Sundays anyway. And so you just take up more of their time Sunday night through Wednesday night. And then on Wednesday night, the last one of the revival, you really hammer it and you say, if you died tonight and were killed by a train on your way home, anybody heard that one before? Then where would you go? Absolutely. Don't leave the building without being right with Jesus. But the purpose of it is to make you feel bad. Actually, it's to make you feel good about feeling bad, about not doing what they want you to do. And you do good for a little bit, right? I mean, a day or two. Yeah, I mean, you're really doing good. I mean, you are suppressing that sin. You're pushing it back to the back, and it's not keeping it from coming out. Days go by, you're feeling really good about it, and then bam, here it is again. Weeks go by, 6 months go by, we're right back to where we were. So what do we have to do? Have another revival, of course. That makes the most sense. I laugh because I've been there. I kid because I care about you and your understanding of the demands of the law, and that you can't even keep up with them if you want to. And it's the same system today. It's just modernized. It's just packaged differently. It's just communicated differently. But it's the same demands. It's the same expectations that if you don't do this, this, or this, or if you do this, this, or this, it's going to affect your right standing with God. But you can't. So why even bring in the law? If sin thrives under the law, and if you have to keep all of it, or you're guilty of breaking all of it, and if you can't keep up with the demands, then why? Why bring in the law in the first place? That's a good question. I mean, I wanted to know as we're going through all this. Why? I mean, why jump through all these hoops? What's the deal? Here's what Paul says. Look what he says, Romans 5. Now the law came in to increase the trespass. What he's saying is, the law came so that sin would increase. Say what? God brought the law so there'd be more sin? In essence, to remind you of your sinfulness. So that you know that you can't keep up to this holy standard that God has. And the law coming in so that sin will increase creates a problem for you and for me. Doesn't it? I mean, if we can't keep up with it, we can't do it, sin just continues to increase, we have a problem. But here's what we've gotten into. I understand, listen, I'm speaking from an understanding place. Right? This isn't preaching to. I've been there, okay? Where year after year, you're introduced to, you're exposed to, you're taught these religious, legalistic demands over and over and over. And in essence, following these rules, following these sacraments, these ordinances, these demands that are placed on you becomes a habit. You just do it because that's what you've been told to do and that's what you've always done. And so you just do it. You form a habit of trying to follow something you can't follow in the first place, but it becomes a habit. Do you know how long it takes to form a habit? Some people say 21 days, some people say 30 days. Most studies now will say that it's anywhere from 66 to 70 days, so about 10 weeks that it takes to actually form a new habit. Now, the law has been in place since 1446 BC, 3,500 years of the law. Some of you have been in the habit of following legalism and religion and unattainable demands your entire life. I get it. It's a hard habit to break. Chicago just thought that girl was a hard habit to break. The law is a hard habit to break. I understand that. But you know what psychologists say? The most effective way to stop a habit is not to focus on stopping a habit. Now, isn't that something? Do you know why? Because they say you focus on stopping the habit, you wind up getting back into that habit, hitting your target. That's a secular world study that'll tell you, whatever it is you're conscious of and focusing on, that's what you're going to get. No. It's not focusing on stop smoking, stop drinking. It's not focusing on stop biting your fingernails. It's not focusing on stop sleeping in instead of going to the gym. It's not focusing on the negative habit that you want to replace. It's focusing on what it is you want to replace that habit with. So, next week, we're going to talk about what it is that God did to replace the demands on you and me to follow and uphold the demands of the law. Because there's something new that God did. So I've got some homework for you guys. Here's what I want you to do. Those of you who have been in some type of experience of a legalistic background, whatever that is, and you know, sitting here, some of you are a little bit restless because you're uncomfortable with this message today. I get it. I understand. But listen, here's what I want you to do this week as you're going through and as you're remembering back to former experiences and teachings and where people put unattainable demands on you. I want you to just make some notes, like physically make some notes in your phone, write them down, and bring them back next week. We're going to have kind of a purging of, in a sense, if you will. Some of you may have some long lists. Some of you may have a couple. That's okay. We're going to have some interactive time next week. And we're going to talk about some of those demands that were placed on you that you knew you couldn't keep up, but you tried anyway, and you had enough of it. But I want to encourage you in the meantime, because in Romans 5:20, where Paul says that sin increased, look at what he says. Where sin increased, grace increased all the more. So next week, we're going to look at what God did in increasing grace. So I hope you'll come back. Invite some friends. Encourage them to watch today's message. Get ahead. We'll do a quick recap next week if they don't get a chance so we can catch them up to speed. But next week, we're going to talk about what God did to solve the problem that we can't even right now. Let me pray for us. God, thank you for today. Thank you for your word. Thank you for being a God that loves us so much that gives us a way to overcome these demands and expectations of the law and the requirements that we know we can't even do it anyway, even if we wanted to. God, I thank you for that. And God, next week as we come back and we prepare our minds and our hearts to receive what it is that you have for us, God, I pray that your Spirit just encourages us and lifts us up and enlightens our eyes and our hearts to the truth of your word and what it is you did through your word and through your Son, Jesus. And God, we thank you and we praise you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.